we first tried to interview him, he threatened to have our producer shot. Don Blankenship is a wealthy, powerful, and widely despised businessman accused of skimping on safety measures at his coal mine, where 29 men died 4 years ago. Despite our earlier unpleasant run-in with him, the other day, Blankenship agreed to go head-to-head with ABC's chief investigative correspondent, Brian Ross, for our series, Nightline Investigates.
Mr. Blankenship.
Even before he and his company were accused of cutting corners on safety that led to the deaths of 29 miners.
You're allowed to get shot. No, how you doing, Mr. Blankenship? ABC News.
Don Blankenship,
Touch my camera.
the CEO of Massey Energy, was already a despised and feared figure by many in America's coal country. This is how he greeted an ABC News producer 6 years ago. But now facing possible federal criminal charges in the investigation of the mine disaster, Blankenship showed up at ABC News, seemingly gentler, but still full of venom, to make the case he's been misunderstood.
I think everybody's despised by some. I mean, like your.
But how about for yourself?
Well, like yourself, you know, a lot of people despise your view, so it's normal.
Why do you think you are despised?
Because I do the right thing, and
Because you do the right thing?
yes.
It's not because you do the wrong thing?
No,
You cut corners on safety?
never did.
Never did.
have. Never did.
That, of course, is not what state and federal investigators found in the investigation of the disaster at what was called the Upper Big Branch Mine.
They told me there'd been an explosion.
Officials said the men, aged 20 to 61, were trapped 1,000 feet underground after a massive explosion of built-up methane gas and coal dust. The federal safety report concluded if basic safety measures had been in place, there would have been no loss of life at Upper Big Branch.
I believe, that Don has blood on his hands. And I believe that justice will be done. I've got to believe that in my heart that it'll be done.
To defend himself, Blankenship has paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce this 50-minute film called Never Again that presents him as a champion of mine safety.
And this documentary is further evidence of his taking his responsibility seriously, even at great risk and expense to himself.
Families of the miners killed in the disaster in West Virginia are outraged at what they call Blankenship's shameless self-promotion.
I think he's a liar.
He is a murderer. He's the devil.
The film repeats Blankenship's long-held contention that the fire in the mine was caused by a natural gas leak that could not have been prevented.
I don't think that anything that was in place in the industry at that moment would have prevented it.
But state and federal investigators say they took a close look at Blankenship's natural gas leak theory and dismissed it as an effort by him to shift the blame away from the allegedly lax safety practices at his company.
He made this suggestion back in June of 2010, and his characterization of this is simply a sham.
It was production ahead of safety.
The Blankenship film also includes an interview with West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, who now says he was lied to and never would have appeared if he had known it was for Blankenship.
Don's taking his millions of dollars that he made off the sweat and blood of the miners and using it now, trying to turn things around and vindicate himself. Now you talk about a cynical approach to something that's heartless. That's about as bad as it gets.
Blankenship's film also takes on the news media.
We now see that reporters, unions, and the government ignored the evidence that supports a theory that makes sense.
Especially ABC News.
In America's coal mining country, we now know.
Seeing a bias before I even asked him the first question.
I don't mind talking to you. We know it'll be biased, but we'll talk.
You think it'll be biased?
Oh, definitely.
I'm not trying to twist it, but
You'll have plenty of time to cut the tapes up and make this look the way you want it,
Blankenship, you need to pay.
In West Virginia last week, many of the relatives of the miners who died protested outside the federal building in Charleston, demanding that the government quickly bring criminal charges against Blankenship. The United States Attorney, Booth Goodwin, told ABC News the investigation is of the highest priority.
We're committed to prosecuting anyone that is responsible for the conditions that led to this horrible tragedy.
So far, 4 former Massey Company employees have been convicted in the investigation, And one, David Hugart, the man on the right, told the court that Blankenship was part of a conspiracy to evade federal safety inspections.
Don Blankenship is a very powerful person.
What we have seen is a conspiracy to violate mine safety and health laws that has been evident most recently in the prosecution of Mr. Hugart, who you mentioned, and that conspiracy was very pervasive.
Blankenship denies any role in that.
Absolutely not. I'm not part of any type of behavior like that.
Have you been told that you're under investigation yourself?
Not directly. You know, I think that it's obvious that that's probably the case, that they've looked at everything.
Do you expect to be indicted?
No.
You don't?
No.
While Blankenship appears in his own film and made the rounds of media outlets,
the King of Coal is here. Welcome, Don. Thanks for being here.
He refused to testify during the actual investigations of the mine disaster.
You took the Fifth Amendment.
No, I just refused to show up. You know, if I had been compelled by a court to show up, I'd have showed up. But, you know, when you're...
But your lawyer said you were invoking your right not to incriminate yourself. What was it you were afraid of incriminating yourself about?
Nothing.
Only thing Don Blankenship is trying to do with this film is to build his image up again.
I feel dishonored.
It breaks my heart that we have to go through this again.
For many of the families, the final outrage is how Blankenship's film makes extensive use of the names and photos of their loved ones, with violin music in the background, supposedly to show his concern for their fate.
I just can't believe that he's doing this. He's just like rubbing our noses in it. Hurting us again. Hurting all these families again.
Have you manipulated this tragedy for your own benefit?
I don't see any benefit in this to me.
Do you have any sense of shame?
No, I'm
sorry. To use these images like this?
I think that a lot of the families appreciate what's being done and some maybe not. I don't know.
You think some of the families appreciate this documentary?
Yes.
Have you talked to them?
No, I haven't.
How would you know that?
Well, because I know how I would feel.
Whatever Don Blankenship does, all these families, he's just making us tighter. Yes. He's just making us stand together harder and firmer, and we're going to fight longer and harder. He might have more money, but he ain't got more fight.
And now the families are fighting for what they say would be justice, criminal charges brought against Blankenship. For them, that would be a powerful message to hold corporate executives accountable for the safety of the 90,000 Americans who go to work in coal mines every day in this country.